So good morning, everyone. I got 11:03. I know some others are still joining us this morning, but we're going to get started. Just so you all know, I'm Dom DeMeo with the CEO of Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance. The Alliance team and I are proud to bring you another, what we believe will be powerful leads presentation. I just want to give everyone a reminder that we are recording today's presentation. So if you don't want to be seen on the screen, feel free to shut off your camera and just have your name. We'd love to see your face if you don't mind it. So, but I just want to give you the warning. Please allow me to extend a warm welcome to our panelists. Michael Brush, who's the partner in charge from Plunkett Raysich Architects. We have with us Lori Gee, Vice President of Client Workplace Performance, Herman Miller, and Bruce
Lori
Loeppke.
G.
Lori G. Sorry, Lori. And Bruce Loeppke, Director of Engineering, Business Development at APG Engineering. So thank you to all three of you who are willing to give time to our members this morning. You'll hear more about the panelists as we progress through our presentation, so I'm not going to go into their backgrounds, but you will get that as we move forward. And I also wanted to extend a thank you to Jennifer Lanning, Workscapes, John Holtz, Plunkett Raysich Architects, and Susan Goldstein with Michael Saunders and Company Commercial for helping facilitate our event this morning. So thank you all. Susan and John are both chairs of committees here at Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance. As usual, I take a moment to thank all of our annual sponsors. Our presidential and executive level sponsors are represented behind me on my screen, as we can't have banners up this morning. And our other sponsors, annual sponsors, can be seen on the website. Those annual sponsors provide us with support throughout the year and allow us to keep pace with the demand for continuing education, connection, and growth inside our programs. So what are we here for this morning? We're here to bring you another Alliance Leads. Normally hosted at our Kaiser University locally in person, we remain committed to the powerful connection through our e-channel delivery this morning. We all know that Florida has begun to reopen under phase 1 over the past few weeks. However, our opening will accelerate with the announcement of phase 2 beginning today. We thought, as team members are reemerging and returning to the office, as well as employers taking precautions to protect their staff and clients, such as precautionary steps in altering human behavior, making recommendations on physical workspace or making changes on physical workspace, and focusing on building systems and improvements such as HVAC and plumbing, that it would be interesting for you to hear specialists talk about what could really be done. I won't give away the secrets, so I'm going to turn the program over to John Holtz to introduce our first panelist.
Thank you, Dom, and good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to be starting this program from my office in downtown Sarasota. And one of the greatest things about chairing the Economic Development Committee is participating in the economy. And by returning to the office, I'm thrilled to be in downtown Sarasota because it means that I'm patronizing restaurants and shops and being part of the goods and services. And as an employer, it's important to lead by example and participate in resilience. And I know you're all looking at this ascot that I'm wearing. It also serves as a mask, see? And leading by example means we as employers, this is a scanner and this is hand sanitizer, we have to participate in making the office space very welcoming and ensuring health and safety to our staff, to our visitors, our customers, and the community. And kicking it off today and sharing with our panel is a dear friend of mine, Michael Brush. We've been working together at PRA for some 20 years. He is a partner in charge of our workplace design team. But a design team is much more than that. This panel today represents a snippet of the collaboration that brings design to our building environment all the time. And our membership with the Alliance is filled with great design professionals. And you're going to learn today about ideas. This is an ideas forum. And we're here to learn about resiliency in returning to the office. We're following the science. We don't have all the answers, but the more we learn, and as some of you have heard from the governor, as we learn more, we're learning to adapt and reinvent this and come back to the new normal. And it's getting better for us, and we're coming out in this phase 2. And with policy, behavior, adapting our offices, we're going to recharge this economy. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Brush, and he's going to kick off our program. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you, John. Let me share my screen, and this might just take a second. Share this, and then I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to hit it twice, and it's going to work. Okay. And I'm in the wrong slide, so let me go backwards. I'm sorry. We had this figured out, and then leave it to me to blow it. There we go. All right, so what I'm going to do is start out today's conversation with a brief explanation of where we are and how we got here, very brief. And then I'm going to show some very simple things that we all can do at the office without having to pull out hammers and call contractors and so forth. Mostly policy things. And there's quite a bit to cover, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, and there'll be time at the end for questions. I wanted to start out by talking about the current situation, and these graphs are from June 4th, so they're admittedly a couple of days old. Actually, they were from June 3rd information published yesterday. But in the United States, we are indeed showing some progress. New cases are dropping 30%, although we still average over 30,000 new cases per day. Average deaths in this country are 1,000 per day, which is a dramatic improvement over the over 2,000 per day that we were showing in mid-April. So again, we're showing progress, but if you do the math, 1,000 deaths per day, 365,000 deaths per year is still a pretty scary scenario. As we know, states are reopening, and Florida is moving along into another phase. There are still some states that are a bit skittish. New Jersey is the last straggler that is showing that they are reopening soon. But you can tell that there's a lot going on in the country, and people are excited about the opportunities. And one of the things I want to say today is that while it is exciting to be reopening again, there's still some caution and some work that we need to do in order to stay safe. And I want to demonstrate that by this map, which shows on May 14th, which is almost a couple of weeks plus ago, this was the condition across the country. The blue areas and the white areas show that the new cases were not increasing, or in fact, they were reducing. And the yellows and oranges show areas in the country where they were actually increasing from day to day from previous days. Now, I want you to watch closely here because as of yesterday, this is what the map looks like now. You can see how, since we started reopening the country, cases are increasing across the country. In fact, if you look at parts of Florida, there's some deep red areas, and Alabama, Missouri, Georgia, some very deep red areas. Now, we have to keep in mind that we got to this place by basically strangling off our economy, sending us all home. Many people were unemployed. There was a lot of fear, and of course, a lot of sickness. But this is the case where we are today after being so cautious. In Florida, actually, Florida has been added by the New York Times to the list of states that is actually increasing the number of cases per day, even though you haven't even moved into the next step. You're averaging 1,100 new cases of illness per day and still 40 deaths per day. At that pace, Florida would have 15,000 deaths over the course of the year from the COVID-19 illness. Now, we're here to talk about how to prevent this from getting any worse and hopefully make it get better. And so we need to address the causes for the sickness, and it starts with proximity to others. And social distancing, we all know about that, so I won't go too much into detail. but keeping our distance from others is very important. The amount of time that we stay with people who might be ill is a second factor that contributes to the chance of whether we'll get it. And then if the person we're with projects droplets either through coughing, sneezing, or talking, that's a really good way to catch the COVID-19 disease. And finally, if the virus is on a surface and we touch that surface and then we touch our face, that is known to cause us to contract the COVID-19 disease. Now, I'm going to go through some policies that address those 4 causes. But I want you to keep in mind, please, that the virus is known to be transmitted by people who are not symptomatic. And you could have the virus in your system for 2 to 3 days before any sign of the sickness is shown. That is why many of these policies, such as masks and cleaning of surfaces and staying away from people, is so important. Because while we may say, hey, I'm not sick, it's all good, you actually may not know if you're sick. And it might be too late for those that you come in contact with. So let's start with the policy recommendations. There's 18 of them. And as I said, we're going to have to go through these kind of quickly. This will be available after the presentation. So we'll go through them. First of all, when you're going to make the decision to bring people back to work, or if you've already made that decision, it's important to try to reduce the number of people returning to the office as much as possible. If people do come back to the office, or those that do come back to the office, we need to train them to stay 6 feet apart from everybody else to every extent possible, no matter where they are. If it's in the kitchen, if it's in a conference room, if it's at their desk, that has to be the rule. People need to stay at least 6 feet apart. That means that we might need to rearrange workstations. And Laurie is going to go into this in much more detail. But some of the things that we've been doing, such as benching, where we line people up and we're face to face, and you may be 4 feet away from somebody and staring them right in the face with the only protection being your computer screen, that shouldn't be acceptable anymore. And again, Laurie will go into that in some detail. We need to avoid sharing workstations. We all heard about hoteling and how people working remotely might come into the office and borrow a desk for a couple of hours, and then somebody else might come in and borrow that same desk. That's not acceptable anymore either. We need to be careful about that, at least for the next couple of months, to find out how things are going to progress. But in the meantime, avoid sharing workstations and equipment. Don't touch somebody's mouse to show them how to make that move. You're gonna have to find different ways to do that. We need to continue conducting meetings virtually if possible. So I think your clients will understand if you say, hey, can we do that remotely? We've gotten used to it and we've proven it can work. And it's a good idea to continue to do that even in the office. If you do have to have an in-person meeting, it should be done in a room large enough to handle the crowd. If you have a 20-person conference room, it's probably now a 10-person conference room. If you had a 6-person conference room, it might be a 3 or maybe a 4. You need to stay 6 feet apart. But remember, the smaller the room, the more likely it is that the virus is swimming around up there in the atmosphere. Remember, the duration of time that you spend with people is a factor of whether you'll catch it. The smaller the room, the more likely the virus is lurking somewhere in that room and you'll grab it. We need to establish and post maximum occupancy in the conference rooms. People need to be reminded often of what the rules are, and sometimes people might think that the rules no longer apply. That is why establishing and posting these things with signage is important. We should train employees to wear a cloth face mask when 6 feet distancing cannot be maintained. If you're going into a conference room, and we'll talk a little bit later about elevators, a mask, according to the research that we've done, a mask is critical in those cases. If you do need to walk into somebody's workstation to talk about a project, pull your mask up. Wear it around your neck if you can. We need to mandate anyone who feels sick is to work from home. We know that can be done. It doesn't mean they don't have to work. They can still stay home and get paid for their hours, but if they feel sick, they should stay home. It's no longer an American characteristic that we go to work no matter what. It's not a matter of toughness, it's a matter of safety. In order to ensure that, we should make sure that office policies support that. And we advocate separating vacation and sick days. The trend has been to create combined paid time off, but because of that, employees have tended to take their sick days, add them to their vacation days and say, hey, now I've got 3 weeks of vacation, and they use their sick days by coming into the office. We can't encourage that, and by separating vacation and sick days, it encourages them to take the sick days. We need to clearly communicate new office policies. All of the things I'm talking about, maybe you could create a laminated card, a little thing on the desk, some signage around the office, but clearly communicate the policies and let everybody know exactly what they are. We recommend assigning a manager to watch over the cleaning of the office, to be a source that people could go to in case there are any concerns. One particular person, maybe it's your HR person, or maybe it's just somebody else in the office who is willing to take on that task. Employees need to know where to go to get information and to express concerns. You should liberally distribute hand sanitizer and wipes throughout the office, particularly in kitchens, conference rooms, next to copiers, any place where it's inevitable that people are going to be touching surfaces all day long. Please put hand sanitizer and wipes near those areas so people can take care of themselves. Of course, we're going to refrain from exchanging handshakes. Maybe we can, adopt the bow. Curtsy has been gone for a long time. Maybe bring that back. Limit the number of visitors to the offices and areas they are permitted to enter. This is going to be a bit of a challenge for some of us, but they need to stop at the front lobby, and if they do need to go into the office, let them be escorted by an employee. Some of us have vendors that have felt free to walk into the office and just do what they have to do. We need to limit that because we don't know what's going on with them, and it's too complicated to find out. Because the receptionist is kind of the first person who will come in contact with these people that are entering the office, sometimes unannounced, a sneeze guard at the reception desk is a good idea. And this can be temporary, and there are some really nice looking ones out there. Going to outside meetings, traveling in general to an outside meeting in person, as we mentioned earlier, that should ideally be done virtually. But if you have to go to an outside meeting, it's a good idea to tell your employees to travel alone. It'll cost a little bit more for travel expenses, but it'll keep everybody safer. And finally, we need to establish guidelines for cleaning the office, and they're fairly lengthy and quite specific. So we recommend going to the CDC website to find out what their guidelines are and follow those. Now, if you're building a new building, you have some great opportunities, and this is where it starts to get up the scale of cost. But if you're building a new building, we have a few things that we'd like to talk about. First of all, consider installing touchless plumbing fixtures and door openers and anything else that we can do to avoid passing on the virus to each other, including touchless elevator controls. And we'll talk about elevators in a little bit. You might consider installing non-porous and or antimicrobial surfaces. And you've probably read a little bit about this, but we're a little bit concerned about this because it can become a panacea if somebody believes that everything in the office is an antimicrobial surface and you can't possibly get sick. It might be better to just save the money, use your non-porous surfaces so that they can be cleaned easily, but don't tell everybody that the surfaces are clean. Tell them they're likely dirty. And this is my favorite. If you're building a new building, if you can do in-floor air distribution where the air comes from the floor, cycles past everybody, and then is evacuated at the ceiling with all the pollutants in the space, that is an excellent way to not only save energy and increase the comfort of your employees, but to evacuate any contaminants in the area. And Bruce is going to talk in detail about that. Briefly, I want to talk about some considerations for multi-floor buildings. The challenge here is the elevators. If you have a building where elevator usage is quite common, you're on the 4th or 5th floor and no one's going to walk the stairs every day like that, the elevator is a significant problem. So there you need to even look further at the ability to limit the number of people returning to the office, if only to try to limit the number of people who are trying to get on the elevator at any one time. No matter what, we think you probably should try to create an arrival and departure schedule with the other tenants in the building if it's multi-tenant, or if you own the building. If you could have floors arrive and depart at different times of the day, all of our businesses are different, but please consider doing that. Again, it would lower the number of people on the elevator. We believe that you need to mandate cloth face coverings in the elevator. The elevator is just not big enough. You might be able to get 4 people on there somewhat safely, but wearing a mask really should be the rule in the building. It shouldn't be a matter of choice. You should provide hand sanitizer in every elevator lobby because we're not supposed to touch our masks with unclean hands. That's not going to be helpful if you're putting it on your mask and then sucking it into your body. And finally, in a multi-tenant building, you should create a means of communicating COVID-19 cases affecting other tenants. We don't always communicate with our neighbors in a multi-tenant building, but at this time, it's extremely important. So I want to end just by saying that we need to limit the number of people returning to the office. That's number 1. Arrange your office space to ensure employees remain at least 6 feet apart. Mandate that employees stay home if feeling sick, and set up your policies to make that not only a good idea, but the chance for people to use up their sick days. And provide masks and sanitation bottles, hand sanitizers, wipes, and so forth for your employees, so that not only are they reminded constantly that this is going on, but they actually use it. They don't have to seek it out. So I'd like to hand this off now to Lori G, and she's going to talk a little bit more in detail about how the space can be affected.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and introduce Lori here. So thanks, Michael. I'm Jennifer Lanning with Workscapes, and just a little bit about us. Workscapes is a full service office furniture dealership, and we are all about service. We don't make any products. So what we do is we partner with really great manufacturers like Herman Miller, and working closely with them, the architect, the designer, and the client to really bring forth solutions that create a great workplace, and using that real estate as a strategic tool for that successful outcome. Workscapes is the largest Herman Miller dealership in the state of Florida. And I am thrilled to have Lori G here with us today. As Herman Miller's Vice President of Workplace Performance, her role is to make clients' workspaces work harder for their organizations and for their people, with the ultimate goal of helping them do great things. So excited to have Lori with us today. And Lori, the floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. And hello, everyone. Greetings from Michigan. That is where Herman Miller's headquarters is located, though I'm reaching out to all of you from my home office today. And on this fine Friday, we're going to embrace a new reality rather than just endure it. And I know that's a lot easier to say when we're on the other side of the curve. But after all, we as a group of professionals have commerce to support and employees to help. And let's dig into some of the thoughts we have on how to support your organization and its work through these very, very interesting times. So let's see if my computer is going to advance for me. So as leaders, you have a big job, and you don't need me to tell you that. But for a moment, let's just juggle 2 of the many balls that are in the air for you. First, let's think about can versus should. Just because your governor has said it's okay to reopen with various stipulations, you're the only one who knows if it's right for your business and your employees. And I think what we're seeing in our work with the Fortune 500 around the globe, as well as small businesses, there's great caution, and there's not a race to go back into the physical workspace for a whole variety of reasons, many of which Michael just mentioned. I will go on record, though, to say that even though we talk to so many organizations, eventually there is recognition that there's value and an importance to get back into that physical workspace. And you can't take that expenditure of your real estate completely off your balance sheet. So we are seeing a number of organizations seek headlines and say, we're going to go completely virtual. What we know is 100% is never really the way to go. So you had to sprint to get your businesses up and running and back operational when you left the office. I look at the return as much more of a marathon and something that's going to take some evolutionary steps to really be effective and to be helpful for your business. So there's no magic switch that we can all flip, unfortunately. The second ball on the screen that I want to have us all really spend our time juggling is this idea of how do we go about yes and how do we take a thoughtful approach that will balance risk and employee effectiveness, that'll balance kind of that level of employee satisfaction and safety. They're not going to be all that happy to follow all those green boxes that Michael just took us through. It's our job as leaders to help navigate that. And I think the other balance, yes, and is how do we accomplish virtual and engagement? So we'll touch on a couple of aspects of that. So let's get started on our yes and approach and think about some of the key components. So I start this very simply around the idea of as stewards of our workforce and the people that we're responsible for, we're going to first take care of all of those physiological needs that Michael just shared with us and their safety needs. After all, that's at the base level for Maslow's hierarchy. And by doing this, we have a chance of advancing the work and the effectiveness of our organizations. So why do you think Walmart and casinos and all kinds of people are spending precious air time and ads showing their very diligent cleaning procedures and protocols? It's to give our mind the confidence and the comfort to go there and spend money. And I think the question and the thing we really want to impress on all of you is the idea of what are you going to do for those overt steps to show your employees that you're really conscious of that and you're taking really key steps to help navigate some of that. So we'll start, though, with a little bit more thinking on the body. Hygiene is the most key thing to pay attention to. I never thought in my many years of planning and developing workplaces that hygiene stations would be such a highlight to so many of our clients, but we are dispersing different forms of hygiene stations in convenient locations throughout those workplaces to make sure that that is a practice. It's not just a check the box thing, but it's a really part of their day. For the more involved step, as Michael pointed to, is the 6-foot distancing. This is here to stay for quite some time. And it is, I think the important thing is by the time you achieve that for the work points for your people and for your circulation, you may only be able to house 50 or 30% of the typical number of employees that are usually in your space. So the normal things, and maybe you're already strategizing through these, are staggered schedules or staggered desk assignments, which you're seeing on the top right of my screen. And you start to see the impact that has on your overall density. Others who might have a means and have the ability with whatever they're set up with for making some additional adjustments are actually, moving those benches that Michael talked about apart so that you get that 6-foot distance. And they're able to make some of those flex and change adjustments. So there are a myriad of ways to adjust what you have to meet these requirements. And we have actually a YouTube video that we'll be providing a link to you that will show you a number of additional thought starters and ideas to maybe stimulate the thinking of what's possible for your unique situation and organization, because there's a lot of great possibilities that won't compromise the work of your people. So getting back to that mind part, and I think this idea of our amygdala, right? Somebody referenced the amygdala as the guard dog of our brain. And if you think of that as that guard dog, that dog is asking, am I safe? And we need to help provide cues and clues that we've put in place some of those safety measures and some ways to actually attend to that. So, one of the things that's rocking a lot of people's worlds as they go back into the workspace is their organizations are really standing firm on clean desk policies, because if you're going to go in and do rigorous cleaning in a routine way, you need to have those desks cleaned, and all those piles of paper need to move aside and be addressed in a different way. So another thing that we're all seeing in our daily lives is that a lot of places are putting plexiglass screens in play. And those are showing up, as you're noting, where 6-foot distancing just isn't possible at those checkout lines, or where there are other situations between patrons or patrons and staff. And based on that, I get asked several times a day, are we going to move back to cubicles? And my answer is an emphatic no. I don't believe we're going to move back to the cubicles that I'm seeing lots of kindred spirits of folks probably of my same generation in our group today. And I think, though, we're seeing many organizations that we work with seek out some level of boundary creation for that psychological safety. And it is only psychological safety. There is not anything in what the CDC has published that's suggesting in an office workplace that screens of a certain height will prevent the spread of COVID-19. So another thing I will point you to is remember that according to the New England Journal of Medicine, the new coronavirus can last up to 3 days on plastic and stainless steel. And we think of those things as, not harboring viruses. And up to 24 hours on porous surfaces like fabrics and things that oftentimes these screens and such can be made of. So all of the materials that you're seeing on the screen of a different kind of separation and enclosure are of highly or of bleach cleanable makeup, so that they can in fact be rid of that when those cleaning protocols kick in. So that's my response to the question I get so often about, are we moving back to cube farms? I'd like to jump to this idea of a both and, a yes and, around the importance of behavior change and built environment change. And when we think about behavior change, we as leaders are responsible to help bring that to life. And we do that by providing clear guidance, by modeling the way, by repetition, because people are not going to like a lot of these things that have to be done for their health and welfare, and to prevent that spike in a second occurrence. And in the built environment, there are a number of things that can be very simple things to do without spending money, because nobody's in the situation where they need or want to spend a lot of money at this moment. Caution tape, turning desks, removing chairs, lots of things that can happen that will make that environment well suited to your folks. So the built environment can change a number of ways. Again, the YouTube video will point you to, we'll have a number of ideas to stimulate that thinking. This is one idea just to give you a flavor of doing it with the idea of the 6-foot distancing without totally compromising your seat capacity. So in the current state, there'd only be able to be 8 people working in this area by maintaining that distancing. By making a few adjustments that aren't spending money or very much money, a few screens and a hygiene station tucked over here in the corner, we're able to actually have 14 people working in that zone. So you got to play some games to make those spaces work, and we're helping a lot of folks do that. So between Jennifer's team, our broader team, there are a lot of ways that we can help you through that. So let's talk a minute about this idea of home. Sometimes it's home versus office. We like to think of it as home and office. And what we're seeing going forward, just as the heads up to everyone on the call, is this is not going to be a binary choice. It was all go home because of very important reasons. Going forward, it's going to be both and, not one or the other. And I say that because we're seeing some really interesting data surface. What we're seeing is that from employee surveying that we're doing, that 47% are stating that as they see the future, now this is their wish, you all ultimately get to decide what's right for your organization, is that they see a mix of home and office in their view forward. That's what they're believing is appealing. When we think about what leaders are saying in a broad group of 300 from the World 50 organization that I participated with last week, and these are leaders from those organizations, those leaders in a quick poll, when they think of the end of 2021, they're projecting, 72% of them are saying more than 25% of our people will be remote at the end of 2021. So those are the things that we don't have an exact crystal ball, but I can tell you, I really believe, and I've lived through the steps that people took in the 90s and lots of debate on whether this would stick. I think we're seeing lots of ways and reasons this is going to stick this time. So together and separate, there's been the biggest upskilling, and I bet for many of us in this Zoom call today, of video conferencing. And after years of trying, it's finally going to stick, and it's here to stay. This screenshot of an interactive session, much like we're in today with over 300 people in it, it affords the together and the separate, albeit very different. This has revolutionized our meetings and our socializing. I think many of you have probably been in those Zoom happy hours. I firmly believe the way we meet, the way we brainstorm, and the way we work together is forever changed. So another part of our work together that we need to be aware of that has emerged, not as strongly as video conferencing, but nonetheless emerged, is asynchronous work. That's that work that's happening together at different times. Those of you who work globally or use Google Docs, Slack, Teams, or other tools like that know the power of being able to co-create across time zones on shared work. This ugly screenshot is from my very own computer last night of asynchronous work that's happening for me with team members around the globe so that we can co-create and do that across time zones and not miss a beat and keep things moving. So why does that really matter? It matters because meeting rooms as we know them are going to profoundly be changed. They won't go away, but there will be fewer of them. I will bet money on that. The idea of coming into a closed room with bad HVAC and lots of things that lots of people have touched is going to cause us not to race back into those situations anytime soon. So why would Herman Miller care about that? Our mission is to help people do great work wherever they're doing it, and to enable emerging work processes and those new work activities. To that end, we do workshops with leaders to figure out what's the right mix and how do you put all this together. And we do workshops with virtual working teams to optimize how they do that work. So what are people doing with all that unused meeting space? Some are storing chairs in those rooms because they want to get them out so people aren't inclined to use them and to uphold their 6-foot distancing. Others are, in fact, just as Michael said, you know, it's a 8-person room that 4 are in, it's a 6-person room that maybe 3 are in, that sort of thing. Some are using smart scheduling systems to actually insert and regiment cleaning 15 minutes that happens between the various meetings. That's quite a luxury, but some are doing that. Others are using those meeting rooms with the doors left open as individual desk spaces for some of their people because they've lost some of that density out on the floor. Others are taking rooms that are adjacent to those elevator cores and using them as sanitizing areas or check-in areas and putting lockers there so people don't cart a bunch of extra stuff into the workspace. So as we think about kind of where we are in all of this, we're all making it work and we're resilient. We're doing a good job on that. The next period of time, the next year, in our view, is about learning and setting our sights on the future, which as leaders, you get to reimagine, as John was describing as we got going. Because of your opportunistic and growth mindset, you can really take this in a great direction. So the yes and is that you will return strong and you will grow your success. And when you think, I'd ask you to think 2 years out from now, what is it that you want your workplace to be known for? What do you want your people to be saying about it? Put your hashtag, if you will, out in the chat field. Be aspirational, after all, it's Friday. Here are some of the hashtags as we've asked a similar question of leaders around the globe as they look at where they want to take this moment and how they really want to make a difference. So I am going to turn it over to our friend Bruce, who's been anxiously waiting to share some great insights on all of the important details about the building infrastructure that is such a critical part of how this moves forward. So I will have to stop sharing. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you, Lori. Looks like we're running along here. Hopefully we can go a little past noon. But anyway, I want to talk about the building systems, what we can do with the building systems, mainly with the HVAC and plumbing. Those are the two systems that probably we can impact most with how we deal with the spread of COVID-19 and any other virus. So I'm going to talk strategies of a typical office building, which has air handlers, duct distribution, and then touch a little bit on some plumbing system issues. I just will say any of these strategies that I present probably need a licensed engineer on most of them to implement them, like me. So let's talk about ventilation. Like saying the solution to pollution is dilution. You need to maximize the outside air intake. And down here in Florida, that can be a little difficult. Most systems don't have the ability to bring in 100% outside air, even though that would be wonderful because it's so hot and humid. You wouldn't want to air condition all that air. But along with that, what comes into the building has to get out. You don't want to just bring outside air in without exhausting it, because that will pressurize your building and cause other issues and problems. The other thing is maximize the supply airflow, the air change rate that you get from your system. Another caution, though, is that increasing the outside air and exhaust air, those are going to cost money and energy to implement. Let's talk about filtration. Obviously, if you can get it out of the air, it doesn't travel around and mix with the clean air that you're putting back in. COVID-19 does like to travel on aerosol droplets, as Michael mentioned. That size is 0.5 micron to 3 micron for those aerosols. That's pretty typical for a virus. Filters are rated, ASHRAE, the Association for American Society for Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, a lovely acronym, we have a lot of those, has developed a rating for filters called MERV, another acronym, Minimum Efficiency Reporting Value. And that is a scale of 1 to 16. And as you go up, you get a better efficiency of filtration. Now, MERV 12 or 13, around that, is actually roughly what an N95 mask media is. One thing that you have to remember on this is that filter, it doesn't do anything if air's not moving over it. So you've got to keep your fan running. This is actually the Merv scale, Merv chart. I highlighted these items here that show what a superior commercial building would use, a MERV 13, and then a better commercial MERV 11, and then if you're just kind of run of the mill, it's a MERV 8. You want to be pushing upwards to this 13, possibly even going to a 14 if you can. And I need to move that forward. Again, installing higher efficiency filters is going to cause a airflow reduction if you do not adjust your fans to compensate for that pressure drop. A higher MERV filter is also going to cost more. It's just the nature of the beast. Humidity control is one of these that maybe isn't quite as important down here in Florida, because we kind of keep our buildings within that 40 to 60% range. We don't have a problem with the minimum side of that. Just a cautionary that if you get over 60% RH in your building, you can cause other problems with other biological growth. And there it is, the dollar sign again. It can cost more to implement this. Room air distribution, supply air that comes out of your diffusers, that's the cleanest air. The return and exhaust is picking up all the contaminants, the dust and everything else. That's going to be the dirtiest air. Michael touched on this, talking about the underfloor air distribution. The best air distribution to minimize contamination is a vertical flow through the space that doesn't cause high velocity jets or turbulence. You find this in ORs, but you don't find it much in other commercial buildings. Now, as Michael mentioned, the underfloor air distribution, or UFAD, another acronym, supplies air from the floor level and lets it migrate or displace air upward through the space. And that is a good approach to air distribution in office buildings. I just threw this in there. You've probably seen this on the internet. This is actually a cluster, a COVID-19 cluster that occurred in China in a restaurant. And it shows that over here where the air conditioner is, the airflow is flowing this way to this side. And these people all almost all of them ended up with COVID-19. That shows you the lateral distribution of air that can be problematic. Let's talk about UVGI, another acronym. Now, it's not a virus, but it is ultraviolet germicidal irradiation. Now, UV light needs to be in the C wavelength, or UVC, to be effective on viruses and microbes, but it does a good job. the dose and the time, the resident time that UV is on a surface is critical. And those surfaces have to be exposed to the light. It doesn't bend around anything and clean things that it doesn't see. You can install these in air handling units. They do a great job of keeping coils clean, and they do reduce the microbe loading in the air if you apply these. And there are special UV light units that can be applied in rooms. And I'll talk about those a little bit here. So let's talk about your HVAC system. Do you own it? If you're in a tenant building, then you are not going to be able to just unilaterally implement these strategies. You should talk to your building owner and see if they will implement some of these. That's probably the best way to do it if you are a tenant. Now, if you do own it and you have a good system, which would be a newer system, a larger system, a whole building that has capabilities for implementing these things, the increase of outside air, adding higher rated filters, the control system that will work for these things, including humidity control, or doing air distribution modifications to how the flow enters the space. And you have to have space in the air handling unit and the power capable to add any UVGI to an air handling system. Now, if you have an older system, it may not be bad. I'm not disparaging any of these systems, but if it's older than 15 years old, it has minimal outside air, small fans, not much control, no ability to modify the air distribution or add UVGI, then you may not be able to do these strategies. And then if you have what I've said is an ugly system, it's a small package unitary system that was really meant for residential application or packaged terminal air conditioners, then that could be a problem. You're not going to be able to implement many of these strategies. So things that you can do, regardless of the system you have, it could be costly, but if you do have one of these older systems or one of these less efficient systems, you might consider replacing it and upgrading it. You'll get better energy efficiency out of those newer systems. And you can then design in these strategies. You can get the better fan, put in the filter racks that are required, add UVGI, do some air distribution modifications. That probably is a good strategy, but it's going to be costly. So other things that you can do if you can't modify or replace your system. There are in-room supplemental filtration units. I'm sure you've all seen them. And they can be applied fairly small to fairly large. You can get Hepa filters. That's an advantage. Hepa filters are beyond the Merv 16 rating. So those are going to do a better job of scrubbing out microbes and allergens and viruses. You have to maintain that. And many products out on the market, you can get them for $200 and on up in cost. So you can also do the UVGI in room or in space systems. This one here on the left is just on wheels, a portable unit. That one actually has a UVGI and a Hepa filter. This one here is one that fits into ceiling grid, and you can replace a 2x4 fixture with that particular type. And there are many out there on the market that you can research and find. So I'm moving on to the plumbing systems. Not to be too graphic right here before lunch, but the flushing of toilets, especially with flush valves, which are mostly in commercial buildings, those create large plumes of contaminated aerosol droplets. You can go and find a lot of studies that say, yeah, that's not a good place to be when you flush the toilet. So if you do happen to have a lid, it is recommended that you put that lid down before flushing. If not, keep those toilet room doors closed, even when they're not in use. Contain those contaminants, and keep the exhaust fans running. Now, a lot of smaller commercial buildings have toilet rooms that have exhaust fans on the light switch. That you really need to just keep that light switch on and keep that exhaust fan running continuously. Now for the drinking water, a lot of commercial buildings are already doing this, but you pretty much have to shut off the valves to these drinking fountains and that are community fountains, and just not use them. It would be recommended to utilize bottled water or a dispenser where you have throwaway cups. And of course, then you have to worry about the waste and handling that. But that would be better than using a drinking fountain. So this isn't just about COVID-19. I pulled this headline from an article, the 2019-2020 flu season. This doesn't include COVID, could cost employers $13 billion. That's just the end of last year, the beginning of this year. So the lost productivity of infectious illness, anything that takes a worker out of their ability or affects their effectiveness to do their job is going to have a big cost to businesses and to the country. Everybody's aware of this, but it's really going to be even more prevalent. You need to recognize that if you put some of these dollars into improving your working environment, doing some of these things that Michael and Lori and I have been talking about, there is a real return on investment for that money spent. So that's it. I've gotten through, and appreciate everybody attending, and for all of us that participated, we thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. We're right at noon and maintaining about just under 70 participants. So in light of time, I will give the first 3 or 4 questions, if there are 3 or 4 questions, a short response, or the participants a chance to give a short response, and then we'll go on to a close. So if you have a question loaded up, first 3 or 4 questions, we'll try to get to. Go a few minutes over, and then I'll do a close. So Dan, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Dom, here's a question for Bruce. Bruce, what are your thoughts on using ozone machines to clean the air?
Well, ozone is toxic. Just know that. There are some machines that do that, but you have to be very careful with using ozone without ventilating or without not letting that ozone build up in your building.
Okay, here's another question for Bruce. From the office building owner's perspective, do you foresee competitive advantage change from providing the intelligent building to a new concept of health-aware office building?
Oh, I would say so. I think that this is, because of the heightened issue with COVID, that's brought everybody kind of up, sensitize them to the working environment even more than before. So I do believe that would be an advantage for a commercial building owner to begin providing those kinds of amenities and talking about them.
And one area that somebody could go to is the Well Building website for some very in-depth conversations about how to create a healthy building. It is a concept that building owners have been using increasingly in the last 5 years. It's different from the sustainability drive that the LEED certifications were talking about. LEED talks about saving energy and providing fresh air, but Well takes it to a tenant occupant level. And it has been something that they've been using competitively to market their buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, that is about it for questions. What a jam-packed program. Thank you all for being a part of this. I'll kick it back to Dom for some closing comments.
Yes, what a great informational session. I just wanted to, in closing, for our members, remember the community forum is still running on our website. It's available for you to put your corporate specials hours if you need to put your hours if they're different than normal, and any needs that you may need from another member. Please use it to talk to one another what you may have or what you may need. Our committees will remain on Zoom, so if you want to test drive a committee, we'll remain on Zoom for the rest of June, and we'll look at what July may look like. You know, as you heard Lori say, you know, the conference rooms are going to be tough, and our committees are larger, so we're going to find a way to accommodate, but we're just not there yet. And then membership, we've adjusted to a prorated membership, so our membership is probably more reasonable now than ever. So if you're a non-member and want to become a member, please take a look and talk to Caitlin Driscoll about membership. Upcoming next Friday, we'll maintain our 11 o'clock spot, navigating a pandemic for nonprofits in partnership with the Lakewood Ranch Community Fund. Be on the lookout for June 18th. It's a Thursday. There'll be some details about an event held between the Alliance and the YLA, our Young Alliance, or Young Leaders Alliance. It's social for that evening. And then on Tuesday, June 23rd, June Lunch with Ranchers, and that will be an online event as well. So I just wanted to close by thanking Michael, Lori, and Bruce, not only for your time today, but for the time and energy that you all put into your presentations. It doesn't just happen. And before we leave, a virtual round of applause to show our appreciation for our panelists. So thank you so much. And with that, we're adjourned, and I hope you all have a great weekend.